I'm really struggling with pressing the buttons lately. It's like a new thing for me. I think it's because suddenly I feel like my trackpad is not. I am. My trackpad's not going to be very responsive. But anyways, hi everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to my channel. I'm Kip Davis. I'm a Hebrew Bible scholar. Sorry, I'm running on very little sleep over the last couple days. So this is going to be fun. I am a Hebrew Bible scholar and a specialist in early Judaism and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it is Wednesday, the 30th of April at 4:30 in the afternoon on the Pacific Coast. I'm joined as always by my friend and producer, Vishanti. Good to see you, Vish. And we're very excited to have with us today the one and the only Dr. Justin Sledge from the amazing channel Esoterica. I don't have one of these. I really wish I did. But welcome, Justin, to my channel. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, guys. It's really great to be on. Yeah, it's great to be able to build these like cool relationships and cool friendships on this platform, and really like do the work of, I don't know, upping the quality of intellectual content on YouTube, because God knows it needs it.
It certainly does. It certainly does. So, and you've been blazing that trail for a while and very effectively. So yeah, I'm honored that that you agreed to come out. And just so people know, I think so you reached out to me about a month ago to do a show on the Dead Sea Scrolls that that appeared on your channel like a couple weeks ago, I think now, right?
Yeah, it must have been
2 weeks ago, something like that. And yeah, and you very kindly agreed to return the favor. We had a really nice chat on your channel about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I figure, why not just continue with that? So it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the people are excited that you're here. So Boring Turtle is here. He can't watch though, because he's doing, what is TKD?
Taekwondo. I wonder what kind of Taekwondo he does. I don't know if he's. I did Taekwondo when I was younger as well. I don't know if he does UTF or WTF. That's a distinction that makes a lot of difference for some people. But
okay,
yeah, or ITF I think is what ITF and UTF. But I wonder which one he does or they do.
Oh, Boring Turtles, you could. Oh, he's probably not watching. He's a Taekwondo class, so he
can't later.
let us know, but maybe later. Let us know. So Prixie Solus Dyslexic Purple is stoked. Triceratops YAC's Learning Chicago Style Challenge is excited. My cuneiform guy friend has recognized you. Dr. Sledge. Riley is one of my Hebrew students, and she's going to be here now. I was just informed of this, that my friend Lawrence over at Milwaukee Atheist was streaming, just finishing up before we started, and he sent all his viewers our way. So he's insistent that we give him a shout out. So thanks, Lawrence.
What up, Lawrence?
Way to go. Good stuff. The Bible Lore Podcast. This is Hayden Tank. So ready for these two to fight. I know the rumors are Kip has been cutting weight through shady means and that Justin has been using HGH, but I think it will balance out to a fair battle.
Yeah, no, man. Yeah, the knockdown drag out on Hebrew Bible.
That's right.
Like I said, we still have to have our long form conversation about what distinguishes formal from semi-formal Herodian.
We absolutely do.
Bring on Adar Yardini and let her be the referee.
That's right. That's coming. So I had to share this too, though, because
wait.
Oh, there we go. Boring Turtle, you're still here.
Okay, yeah, WTF and ITF. Okay, nice.
Excellent.
Yeah, I grew up in ITF, so I have a black belt in ITF Taekwondo.
Oh, wow.
Awesome. He doesn't deny the HGH.
I had to share this, which showed up on my Blue Sky feed, because it made me smile. Best
Yeah.
ZZ Top band ever.
Yeah,
I
that's
if
you know what's funny. Many years ago, in a different life, I was part of a cover band for Sukkot, and we named it Seat Seat Top, and we did ZZ
Nice.
Top covers with the lyrics changed.
Wow.
nice,
good.
very good.
Seat top.
That's
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it.
So, yeah, it's the gamble, right? Are they ZZ Top members? Are they Haredim? Or are they hipsters? And in Brooklyn, you can never know. It's really
Yeah, you never know.
they can be all three somehow.
Somehow. All right. Okay. Just to give people a rundown for the show today, I invited Dr. Sledge on to talk a little bit about his work, his academic work, and his work on YouTube, and some of our encounters with Christian apologetics. And he has also agreed to answer audience questions if you have them. So please, if you have questions, start posting those in the chat. Vishanti will keep an eye out for those. Super chat for priority. Get them in early, and we'll start to get to those in about an hour or so.
That is not the chat I wanted to highlight. Simone, welcome, says, my dream is to start a doom metal band and do a concept album with only lyrics from Aicha, which is Lamentations. I just want to say, was that sparked by my Mizmor shirt that I'm repping today? One of two Jewish doom metal bands, the other being Shemesh, which you should listen to both of them. Just saying.
One definitely could do an entire, even funeral death, to Eicha, or any sort of those hardcore piyuts from Middle Ages.
I'm translating one right.
There's some great medieval sermons that are just so metal that it's just the rabbi berating the congregation, like, may we merit the crusaders to murder us because we don't even merit that. We're so bad.
Oh.
God.
Yeah. People are like, where did all the prophets go? Bro, they don't go anywhere. They were still spitting fire in the Middle Ages. What are you talking about?
Right. So yeah, that stuff is intense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love to get folks questions and love to talk about,
big fan of the Pew team.
Yeah, the Pew. I mean, I love reading those things. Again, on like Tish B'Av, just like working through some of that stuff. It's just it's bleak, but
yeah. My Belter friend replied regarding your Gamar question.
Yeah.
They said the Gamar is usually understood to have been formed from a halakhic discussion, hence the differences between the Babli and Yerushalmi. And that being said, the Gamar probably addresses almost every mission in Avot somewhere. And I'm like, okay.
I mean, again, that's the answer I've heard before, is that there's no halacha in Pirkei Avos. But hold on, I told myself I'm gonna not do like my yeshivish Hebrew, so I'm gonna try to keep it more academic Hebrew. Sorry, but it's gonna happen again. So,
I say go for it. I say go for
it. It's really like I really have to,
we'll allow it.
It's like, I don't know how you feel, Kev, but it's like academic Hebrew is just an artificial language. Like no one speaks that way. Like no one in a yeshiva speaks that way. No, in Israel they don't speak that way. It's such a weird kind of Hebrew that I only use basically in academic settings. And so in my mind, I find it very difficult in like talking out loud to like switch to academic Hebrew. So if I lapse back into my the way that I think in Hebrew, then I apologize. I'll try to correct for it.
Well, you're fine, because it's the only Hebrew I know is academic Hebrew, but which I still insist is different from seminary Hebrew. But
because they do the th sound, and I've heard Christians. And they pronounce the like a vav with a wa sound, and the
yeah, and it's like,
it's a dead giveaway.
Yeah,
every
yeah,
time.
I've heard that from Christian folks I know who've learned Hebrew in that setting. And again, my yeshivish Hebrew is like we at least in Ashkenazi accent we pronounce the tav with no dagesh as an s sound. Perke avos, that's a perke avot. And so, again,
Laughs in Sephardi.
Yeah. And even
Regional
Sephardim
dialects.
even Sephardim have a very distinct the Sephardi they teach is Sephardi is not really Sephardi Hebrew. But anyway, neither here nor there.
Cool. Well, maybe we can. What's this?
Can you demonstrate the differences in the kinds of Hebrew? Kind of just did a little bit, sort of.
A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of a great example that really highlights it. Like to say forever in standard academic modern Hebrew would be la'olam va'ed, right? Like something like that. And I would not say that. I would say lo'olam void. Like that's just that's
which is just a much easier way to say it too. Like
I mean that's what I've noticed is really the difference is the vowels and the tav without a dagesh. That's really the things that stand out to me.
Yeah, I mean
Yisrael versus Yisroel.
Yisroel, yeah, and also like Litvish speakers speak differently than other like Eastern Europeans. So like I my Hebrew is more Litvish, and so I would say Terra as opposed to Tyra.
Yeah, we just had somebody.
Yeah,
from
Torah is very that's more Hasidish sort of Litvish would say Terra like So again, these dialects get we get wild. The R sound. I mean the R sound in Hebrew. Do you trill your R or do you swallow it like in modern Israeli Hebrew?
French.
Yeah, like French, like a French R.
Torah.
Yeah, Torah. Versus Tyra or it's
Torah.
Yeah, Torah, which is more like
I would love to hear more people tap or trill it. That would be kind of cool.
That's more it's more Sephardim.
I rarely hear that, so it'd be kind of nice.
Sephardim talk. I mean, that's the way Sephardim speak. At least as far as when I've been in, I've only been in a couple Sephardi synagogues, and also the Roman Hebrew, the Ramoniat Hebrew that they speak in Rome. They speak a distinct form of Hebrew that's all their own, and they have their own minhag too.
Interesting.
That minhag goes back to temple times.
Whoa! Wow.
Like that community it's been a continuously functioning community since the days of the Second Temple, and so they have a minhag that's all their own. Like it took me I've only been to a Roman synagogue twice, and it took time to like figure out what's happening because they have customs that go back to that no one else in Europe has, and at least they claim go back to the temple times, but which is possible, I suppose, because that community has been there since the Second Temple before the So
yeah, it seems plausible, right?
Yeah, it's at least possible.
Yeah.
So that's a whole distinct community there with the Romans.
Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
The fun things about Hebrew pronunciation.
Yeah, I was not even talking about the Yemenites. They have a whole separate thing as well. Very old community.
Yep.
So
and they still pronounce the difference between ayin and an aleph. It's cool to hear them speaking.
Yes, right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with the more guttural.
Yep.
G sound in your throat, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's funny because the Gamar says that if you don't pronounce the difference between an aleph and an ayin, then God don't hear your prayers. There's a Gamar that says that if you don't pronounce the difference, then it's all horrible.
But
if you say prayers without
God who split the languages doesn't understand one of them.
Hey, look, that is one Gemara.
Yeah, I know.
So that's one. I just like how elitist it is.
Their opinion.
Very. Yeah, right.
Have you ever had your pronunciation of something corrected in the comments? That's the guy from Reddit in the Gamara.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Or I think it was a French guy who was executed, and they're like, any last words? He goes, yes, I see that you've made several spelling mistakes in this writing. My man.
Yep. There's always that.
I'm mean, didn't the sages also say that like angels can't understand Aramaic or something? So
Demons can't.
Demons
The
can't.
demons
There
can't
you go.
understand.
Yeah,
Aramaic.
Shadim can't
They don't understand
understand. Well, they can. No, Shadim can't understand Hebrew, and the custom. The reason why that is, or rather, they can't understand Aramaic, and the reason why is because they say in the commentary of the Haggadah, that's why at the very beginning of the Haggadah it says, "Let all who come in who are hungry, let them come in and eat," and you say it in Aramaic. And they're like, why isn't this in Aramaic? Because like at that time no one understood. It was written in Aramaic originally when people still spoke Aramaic. They're like, oh, it's not in Lashon Kodesh, it's not in Hebrew, because if it were in Lashon Kodesh, the demons would understand that, and the demons will come, the Shadim will come in your house. Then you don't want that. There's all kinds of Passover customs that have to do with like not making sure you don't invite demons. There's a whole section of Tractate Pesachim about not doing things in pairs because pairs attract demons, Shadim. And there's all kinds of tricks you can do to make sure that you're not doing things in pairs. My favorite part of that whole discussion, though, is they get to the end of this long, turgid thing about we're not drinking 4 glasses of wine because we're interrupting each one by looking at the street or looking at the rafters of the house. And so you're drinking 1, 1, 1, 1. And they go through this whole long spiel about how to avoid all this business of pairs. And it says in Eretz Israel, they don't care about this. Like in the West. In the West, this is not a concern. And it's clear there was some person from Eretz Israel who was in the discussion, and they were like, we don't do this.
What are you doing, guys?
This is weird.
This is weird.
What's going on?
I guess though, if you're living in like Eretz Israel versus like Babylon, which has probably got like Shadim everywhere and whatever, it's like that's probably more of a concern. But
yeah, or just
I just imagine the guy sitting there in like the Beit Midrash or whatever, just going,
what are you talking about? And also, you just in the Yerushalmi, you don't get all that stuff. Like it's really Bavli customs that I think are particular. I think it's part of the syncretism that occurs among the Jewish communities at Usha and Pumbedita, where they pick up a lot more of these like magical, like whatever we want to use that term, but they superstitions or whatever. I don't like that language, but they pick up a lot of these customs that I think were more typical of that region, which is just what everyone does.
So we do have a few questions, but I did want to kind of open with something that I noticed in the comments yesterday. People were kind of trying to wrap their brains around esoterica and magic and how you kind of define or use that in your work. So would you kind of share with us your usage of like esoterica and how you understand magic?
Yeah. So, there's this huge debate in the study of esotericism, sort of launched by this big paper, Was ist Esoterik, about what exactly is esotericism, because the more you think about this concept, the more that it breaks down, like every category, right? Any category that you sufficiently defines itself out of existence. Us philosopher types like to say that categories are useful, but they're never real. And so insofar as it's useful, you should use it. And when it fails to be useful, Gnosticism being the best example of this, it's a useful category. But if you take 3 or 4 texts from the Nag Hammadi library, you can break any definition of Gnosticism by comparing the Apocryphon of John and the Gospel of Truth, and it'll break any definition. So basically, the way that I use esotericism is sufficiently vague to cover basically anything that I want to make on my channel. And that is such that it's any repressed, suppressed, or otherwise discarded aspect of history, philosophy, and religion. It could be actively suppressed in the sense that the Inquisition tried to destroy this and it survived. It could be repressed in the sense that the Enlightenment chose to forget about all kinds of elements that actually make the Enlightenment possible. I'll give one example. Rationalists love to forget that Descartes birthed rationalism because he had a series of mystical dreams. That's a thing they're really interested in forgetting about.
Really? Wow.
Oh yeah. And this is the thing they're like, like it shouldn't be the case that the guy who founded rationalism did it because he had a bunch of mystical dreams. That shouldn't. We don't like that story. We don't like that Newton
does not process.
Yeah, it's like divide by zero. We don't like that Newton wrote way more on biblical prophecy and the Third Temple than he wrote on physics. Physics was a hobby.
Wow.
The Third Temple was his project. So these are the aspects that we've repressed. So suppressed, repressed, and I think in other ways, just sort of don't get talked about. They, and again, I'll give one example of biblical scholarship stuff is, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Obviously, there's a lot of material in the Dead Sea Scrolls. What I'm interested in is a lot of the material that doesn't get a lot of airplay, like the cryptic texts, the exorcistic texts. The fact that there's a brontologion in there. There's like a mechanism by which to like tell the future by when thunder happens. Like, what is that doing in there?
Something vaguely horoscopy.
Yeah, vaguely a horoscope.
Physiognomic texts.
The physiognomic text, like I think 4Q186 is this kind of, and they often tend to be written in this cryptic script. So, with channels like Kips and maybe other channels like Let's Talk Religion, they have to cover introductory level stuff, and I wouldn't say superficial because it's not superficial, but it's very rare that you get to sort of drill down and say, I'm going to make a 40-minute episode on the Brontologia texts or the cryptic texts or just the exorcistic texts. So that's kind of the way I cover esotericism. But again, this category can break. I'll give a great example of how it's really easy to break this category. We now consider astrology to be sort of grouped under esotericism because it's been repressed in the sense that the Enlightenment has rejected it as pseudoscience. For most of the history of the university in the Western world, astrology was just a course at university. You just took it as part of your standard education. You couldn't be a doctor without it because you couldn't determine when you did bloodlettings without figuring out based on astrology when you did them. And so now, again, we think of bloodletting and astrology as pseudoscience, and perhaps they are, but was that esoteric in the 15th century? Not in the least. So these categories, again, they're useful, but they're not real because the more that you dig into them, they kind of fall apart. So I try to have a pretty big tent when I do work in esotericism. And that I have that for two reasons. One, because I think the category is fuzzy, just philosophically. And the second is because there's just stuff that, doesn't get covered in a history class, and I want to cover it. For instance, I just started a whole series on libraries before Alexandria. We all heard about the Library of Alexandria, and if you're really cool, you've heard about the Library of Ashurbanipal, but that's still only 600 BCE. What about the libraries that existed 2,000 years before that? What about the library at Ebla, or seems to be a library at Ebla, or the library at Abu Salabih? We never hear about that because the literature is so specialized. So it allows me to focus on that kind of stuff as well.
Cool.
Nice.
That's cool.
Kip, before we get too far off topic, you should let him in on the Hatikva joke because I've already seen somebody in the chat.
Are you already seeing some of this? So you may see this. You may see this come up, Justin, in the chat.
Utter brain rot.
Yes. So are you familiar with Wes Huff? You must be by now.
I know he's an apologist that was on Joe Rogan or something.
Joe Rogan. Yes.
Yeah.
So he made I had a kind of a back and forth with him and some other Christian apologists about the use and abuse of 1Q Isaiah A from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he did a whole thing on his channel with an evangelical scholar by the name of John Mead, talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this was a video that an edited video that Wes put together, and he when speaking about how the Hebrew language works, John Mead made the point that you can effectively say, they were discussing how to define a word in Hebrew when you've got prefixes and suffixes and different parts of speech that can be incorporated into a single construction. And he made this point that you can say very simple phrases with effectively just an individual word using for example, something like a haftika, I love you. And Wes made a graphic for that for his show, and it failed pretty spectacularly, and he ended up with
I can say a haftika, I love you.
So Yeah.
That's interesting.
I know, right? So
you know what? You should have just said what you were thinking, which was "bless your heart."
Yeah, that's not Hebrew. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
have to admit, I don't. Should I say this out loud? I
Yeah,
don't
go for it.
like.
you're on my channel.
Yeah,
Say what
I've
you want.
never like. I very rarely will I watch religious studies content, especially like any sort of dogmatic content, unless I'm looking for that perspective. And this is true
Mhm.
of lots of lots of religious stuff. But yeah, I think someone sent me a link about the Wes Huff was on Joe
Mhm.
Rogan, and someone sent a thing, and I sort of clicked through it, and I remember him saying something that seemed really outrageous to me, that that the Great Isaiah Scroll completely agreed with the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Yeah.
For word.
And I just been looking literally that day at the Great Isaiah Scroll, because I was looking at the word Lilith appears for one of the few times in the Great Isaiah Scroll.
In the Great
And
Isaiah Scroll.
Yeah, and it occurs in the Great Isaiah Scroll, Liliot, in the plural. And I'm like, well, that's a place where it definitely doesn't agree. And it just like happened to jump to my mind, where I'm like, that was, to me, I was like, hold on, that's not true. Like, I literally was looking at the scroll, like, not literally looking at the scroll, but looking at it, scan. I'm like, no, it's Liliot, and it's plural in the Great Isaiah Scroll, or in the Masoretic text. It's singular. And I'm like, that's the kind of stuff where I hear that and just turn it off, because
I'm like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, or just that it's
smart.
not that, and I want to say, and again, I don't know this person, Wes Huff, so I don't want to say what they do and don't know. But what I will say is that there's like an agenda when people want to say, when there's an agenda there, right? There's like things need to be a certain kind of way for me to believe the certain kind of things that I need to believe. And that logic is just a logic that, like, I don't need, and I don't think benefits the kind of work I want to do. And so me spending a lot of time on it, like, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I was telling Derek over at Myth Vision, I was down in Florida last year, and he's like, why don't you debate with the apologists? And I'm like, because they're not interested in a debate.
Yeah.
Like, there's not.
Very true.
There's just nothing. There's nothing I could say, right, that's going to like defeat the risen Jesus. Like, if your basic assumption is that the risen Jesus exists and has done certain kinds of things, or that Moses went up on a mountain and got a bunch of rules. I'll point this finger to myself and my community, the Haredi community. There's just nothing I'm going to be able to say that's going to disabuse them of living the kind of life that they feel like they need to live. And so any kind of debate is like a pseudo debate. It's like performative. It's like performance art. And it's like identity politics meets performance art, and I don't want to do either one of those things. I don't see how it actually serves, I don't see how it serves communities. Actually, it seems like what it does is like reinforces the kind of balkanization of religious and academic and secular communities. And that kind of balkanization is not something I want to see continue, because I really feel like it's doing a disservice to both communities, actually. But yeah, I also, like, with the apologetics folks, like I said, there's nothing that, I'll sit down across the table from them. I was like, anything I could say that would make you cease to believe that a guy in the 1st century rose from the dead and fixed a problem from a rib lady. And if the answer to that is no, then there's like, what am I, yeah, there's nothing I can do with that.
It's true. It's very true.
Simone concurs.
But I'm happy to sit across the table. I'm happy to sit across the table with, Haredi people, Christian fundamentalists, to build bridges, to be like, hey, we can talk.
Sure.
But the idea that I'm going to, it's not a video game. There is no beating anybody. There's no beating me. I'm also, like, irrationally, at some level, committed to certain kind of a priori beliefs. like that are
I mean, you
probably
would
part of
think
my
that they
psychology.
figured this
And
out like in the Middle Ages with the disputations. It's there for show. It's there to reinforce what people already believe.
Yeah. And also, I think also, I mean, it's really a bad look if Christian apologists demand that Jews debate them. That's not a good look.
Yeah, that's always ended well.
Maybe.
Yeah. It's not a good look.
Maybe that's why you don't see it.
Something.
Oh.
The least high, which I applaud you for that. That name's pretty clever. They sent a super sticker that just said vibes.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I mean, one of the things that I was interested in hearing about, Justin, was I mean, you talk about this a little bit on your bio. We talked a little bit about it prior to the show we did on your channel. But even just your journey, like your academic journey from where you came from, growing up in the South, and how you ended up becoming fascinated with the arcane in religion and philosophy in Detroit.
Yeah, in Detroit, where I am now. So I grew up in a working class family. My dad was a pipe fitter. I used to work with my dad. I remember like coming out of 125-degree Fahrenheit, ceiling or attic, literally pouring the sweat out of my boots as a teenager, working working as a pipe fitter. My dad was a pipe fitter, put in sprinkler systems. And from the Jewish angle of things, right, is that it's sort of one of those things where like my family was nominally non-religious. My father was Christian. My biological father died when I was very young, and my mother was sort of all over the place. And yeah, there was a moment where I turned 12 and mom sat me down and said, "Hey, just so you know, like you're Jewish, you should sort this out." And so I called Rabbi Egoff, and you're going to go to the synagogue and he's going to sort you out. And I'm like, okay. So I went and met with Rabbi Egoff at the only synagogue at that time in Mississippi. And Mississippi has so few Jews, there's not even Chabad there. At least there wasn't Chabad at the time. That was Chabad on the coast. I mean, there'll be Chabad on the moon. Elon gets to Mars, there'll be Chabad there, asking people if they put the filling on today. Need some candles?
But not in Mississippi.
Yeah, not in Mississippi.
Really.
That's but yeah, I sort of knew growing up that I was different and this kind of religiously and stuff like this. And so so that was sort of a movement in the direction of Judaism. I think much to my mother's horror, I became pretty enamored with the religion and started getting pretty into it. And I think most parents want their child to be religious, and my mother was like, "Hey, you can just like do the culture thing. Don't do the religion thing."
They're like the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, it was sort of a journey, right? I was like, started attending synagogue and got pretty into it. And, eventually, was working in tech at the time and got some time off from some big projects and studied in the yeshiva world. So I was like in the Haredi world for a while, which was great and terrible experience. I mean, as a man, it's great. And as a man who has any values that appreciate, women and other people, it's not so great.
Yes. Not very egalitarian.
That's one way of putting it.
At all.
Yes. That's one way of putting it. But I got the esotericism part came along with the Judaism part. I remember hanging out with this local a good friend of mine, David, growing up was Catholic, and we used to hang out with his parish priest because he was the only person that would talk to us about religion. And so we could just talk about anything, about the Bible and Jesus and Moses and just anything. And so he would just sit around with us and just like shoot the breeze about, so how does the Trinity work? What's going on with that? And he would just like hang out with us. And like, in fact, the first esoteric book that I ever got was a copy of Sefer Yetzirah that he gave me. He was like, your people wrote this, figure it out. It's like, I can't make heads or tails of this. And I still have it. I still have that exact copy. And
we've been working on it for several centuries.
Yeah, I'll never be done with it.
Yeah.
And so I got really interested in that kind of like hidden dimension of Judaism. And this is the early days of the internet, and I was taking Latin at the time in high school. And I remember coming across, I was interested in codes, and I got interested in alchemy because I thought alchemy was cool, all these cool pictures and weird images and stuff. In fact, for my Latin 2 high school class in alchemy, I convinced my Latin teacher to let me translate a tractate from an alchemical manuscript, or from a early modern alchemical book. And so it was a neat project, and I still have my translation. It's not very good, but and at that point, I found out about this guy, John Dee. And allegedly he and his scryer medium were communicating with angels. And what jumped out to me about that was not that they were talking to angels, because people do crazy things all the time. What struck out to me was that the angels had revealed a language, and that this language, the so-called Enochian language, or the celestial speech, what stuck out to me is that it had a grammar, and it had conjugations and declensions. And as a person learning Latin, and as a person who had, I never failed a Latin exam, but you can't fake conjugations and declensions.
No.
Either either they're right or they're wrong.
Yeah.
They're mathematical in that way. And there was something about the fact that this language had those structures that said, you couldn't fake this. This is not a fakeable thing. And at least for me, my 15-year-old self, that was weird enough that I had to really chase that rabbit all the way down the hole. And eventually it led me to taking a degree in Amsterdam, and the only place in the world that grants an academic advanced degree in the study of esotericism. That's the University of Amsterdam. Wow. And I spent the entire time I was there just writing on that question. Like, what in the hell happened? How do you explain this? This is so weird. And
early conlang.
Yeah, and again, it's like, is it constructed? Is it not constructed? Is it revealed? What do these categories mean? How does the mind work? Is one of the questions I really got into, is that we tend to think in terms of really strict binaries, that something is either a fraud, you're just making it up, or it's really real. And I'm of the mind that I think religion is precisely the place where those kinds of binaries break down.
Yes.
And this is why people throw shade, for instance, at the LDS movement, the Latter-day Saints movement. They say, "Oh, Joseph Smith was just a charlatan." I'm like, I don't think that a man who's just trying to hook up with a bunch of people is going to get himself killed in a jail and do all this crazy shenanigans just because he's trying to get laid. He could have got laid a lot easier than that.
Maybe he's just extra.
I think there's something going on there. And again, I'm a materialist. I don't really believe in gods and angels and all that. But I think I think these categories, like, fraud, or you made it up, or it's really real and revealed. I think the human mind is just much more complicated than that. And there's a paper I want to write about that, or something I want to do about it. But yeah, so it's led me to this sort of very niche academic world where I study this stuff. And I guess I'll also say that I grew up on a pretty steady diet, as a lot of kids, of like, did you guys ever watch like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, or like Leonard Nimoy on In Search Of? I might be showing my age a little bit.
Yeah.
Like all those kinds of shows that were like Atlantis and ghosts and Bigfoot and whatever. That stuff just fascinated me.
Yeah.
And I think that part of what happens, I think, for most people is that either you go whole hog into that stuff and you become sort of like conspiracy comorbidity, like you really do believe in, Atlantis and Bigfoot, and, Bigfoot came from Atlantis. Because typically you don't believe in one conspiracy theory. You're right. You typically believe in, I refer to this as conspiracy comorbidity. But I remained interested in that stuff, but then I became skeptical of it, and I combined those two. I didn't go full skeptical and say this is all nonsense and not worth studying, and neither did I say Atlantis is real and we need to go to the Atlantic. I was like, let's combine these, and so that is sort of academic study of esotericism. I don't need to believe that Yaakov Burma really saw God in a piece of polished pewter. What I have to believe is that he believed that. And then I need to take seriously that he experienced that, and then talk about what happened, talk about the ramifications, etc. any more than I need to talk about, any more than I need to believe that the world's going to end in an apocalyptic battle with the sons of light and the sons of darkness.
Right.
To
Yeah.
So it's a similar kind of hat that we all wear, where we don't need to commit ourselves to believing in the material, but we need to commit ourselves to taking it as seriously as possible on its own terms. And so that's the way I function with the content I make.
That's really good. And it makes me think. I think I've mentioned this a couple here, maybe a couple of other places. I used to work at a provincial historic site that's on the Stahlis Nation, which is just across the river from me, across the Fraser River on the North Shore. And they've adopted within like their as their own tribal representation here the Sasquatch. And we have at the museum in the historic site there that I worked at, we had a whole like a Bigfoot exhibit. There's people there who take it very seriously. I had a guy that I worked with who would come in and tell me stories about like encounters that he would have. He came in one morning and he's playing me stuff that he recorded on his phone, from the night before. And he's like, do you know what this is? And I'm like, I have no idea. It just sounds like people screaming in the woods. And he's like, no, it's like these are Sasquatch calls. And I'm like, wow, like there is this point where so many people will have these. I think it's like you said, that this stuff has to be real on various levels, in various contexts, and it is something that we do need to take seriously, even if we don't believe it, or even if we think we can explain it. But wow.
And I think
it's real to the person going through it.
Right.
So
in skepticism, skepticism is not disbelief. Skepticism is withholding judgment. And that's what I mean by when I say I'm a skeptic about Sasquatch or Atlantis, it just means that I'm like, I don't have a lot of evidence for this. I mean, is it possible that there are cryptids in the Pacific Northwest? Sure. Is it possible that First Nations folks encountered them? It's possible. But is the data compelling enough for me to say that they exist? It's not compelling enough for me. But that doesn't mean that I'm, that all that means is that I'm suspending a strong judgment. In the same way that, people like, well, how do we know that Solomon really existed or Jesus really existed? I'm like, I don't know that they really existed to a certainty, but the data is just as strong as Bar Kokhba or something. And so I like, they probably existed. As a historical.
We do have letters to and from.
Right, for Bar Kokhba. Yeah, I think Bar Kokhba is more likely to have existed than Jesus, but I think Jesus is. Although again, did Bar Kokhba himself sign those letters, or are those letters written by secretaries, or who knows? But I think that I'm not of the camp that that skepticism is disbelief until there is evidence of belief. I think that skepticism for me is that I suspend judgment about beliefs until some standard of evidence shows up that's very personal to me. That's also another thing that I think people don't really talk about, is that there are no a priori standards of evidentiary levels. There just is no a priori evidentiary bar. That just does not exist. That is a function of people's psychology, of people's upbringing, of people's like scientific training, of all kinds of trainings. And so when someone says to me like,
you mean to tell me? I was going to say, you mean to tell me there's nowhere I can go that's going to establish for me exactly what extraordinary evidence is?
I hate to tell you. Wow. Yeah.
Can't tell me there's not an objective standard.
I wish there were. It may make the world a lot easier. And again, this is why when I talk to people, like, I'm not a theist myself, but when I meet people who are theists, I'm like, you know what? Your position's eminently reasonable. Like, if the principle sufficient reason is the case, which again, that's an a priori that seems to be the case to me. That's a pretty decent hypothesis that something made all this. Every other thing that we experience is made by something else. That's a reasonable thing to believe, that some very powerful entity made all this. So yeah, it's like, do I happen to believe that? No. But is it reasonable for people to believe it? Yeah.
There's a lot of things in the natural world that defy our intuition, but are like evidentiary, like evidentially true.
Yeah.
So if you were to tell people like, oh, there's these really tiny little things that can make you sick, and you can't see them, they're there, but you can't see them, people are like, what? It's like, yeah, that's germ theory.
Yeah. Or that we're 99% empty space.
Counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Exactly.
These things are just completely unintuitive. So when folks are like, oh, I can't believe this doesn't meet my utilitarian whatever standard, I'm like, okay, but
yeah, just same with I meet people who are like, I don't think Solomon was a real historical character. I'm like, okay, that's reasonable. Like, I don't know if I believe that there are Solomonic gates at Hatzor either. I don't know if Solomon built those gates. Do I see gates, and do I see several of them have these like compartments, 3-part compartments? Maybe. Is that evidence of central planning on the part of some Solomonic leader? I don't know. Maybe. So yeah, I think that, again, for me, it's just about being very comfortable sitting with maybe, and not sitting in judgment of people who land hard on a position. Like I'll give another example of this when it comes to biblical stuff, is that I was really convinced for a long time of the low chronology. Like I was really on Team Finkelstein about the low chronology.
Right.
It just made a lot of sense to me. And then I read Dever's book, and I was like, maybe not. And like, how hard was I really going to bite on to the low chronology? I'm like, not very hard. Like it does make some sense of the data in a way that makes some, but I wasn't going to go hard on it. And the same with it, because I think the data is not conclusive about it. So anyway, that's just a thing when it comes to biblical stuff. And again, I have to say this to be clear: I'm not a biblical scholar. Like this is not a thing I do professionally.
As I said on your show, right?
Yeah, I play on TV. So I think people should take my whatever I say about that stuff with whatever grain of salt they deem appropriate.
Andrew, Solomon was probably real based on the rule of cool. Clavicula Solomonis is really cool, and it says it's from Solomon.
Sure, yeah. If it's
in that case, the Kabbalah goes all the way back to goes all the way back to the Roman Empire or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, this is this is a place where we talk all the time about the Bible and about biblical studies. So like one of the things that I was really interested in chatting with you about is in view of like the intersection with the arcane that fascinates you and that you tend to dive into in your own work. So I spent quite a bit of time thinking about this in some of my work when it comes to the Hebrew Bible and early Judaism, is this idea of magic and ritual and the parts that these play in the development of these religions. And as I like your definition of esoterica as stuff that's been suppressed or just fallen out of usage. And it seems to me that like for a long time I read so I wrote a little bit about on this a little while ago. I was reminded of this just getting ready for this. I sent you guys the paper that neither of you have read yet. So
maybe you should send it the day before, not the day before.
I know, but it was a busy weekend, and I was like kind of scrambling, and it literally was something I just kind of thought of. But so when I was working on this paper, what I was doing was I was looking at forms of types seeing if I can explore some typographies of texts or manuscripts from this more ritualistic, artifactual kind of perspective, to uncover something that we might consider closer to magic or to mystical uses of objects, apotropaic devices, right? In antiquity. And when I started reading, doing my reading in a lot of the secondary literature about this stuff, it became fairly frustrating to me right away, in large part just because of how much this has tended to get ignored, in my opinion, without much good reason. It feels like there's this sense within the modern Western rational approach to, I guess, the text and the world of the Hebrew Bible, which tends to also think that, well, we all know that magic is bullshit, so
do we know that?
it's not well, this is what
at least the
some
story we tell
scholars will tell
ourselves.
you, right? This is the
Yeah.
story we tell ourselves, right? So it's not a useful category in terms of investigating the literature or even the history behind the literature, and that kind of piqued my interest. So I wondered if that's something that we could talk a little bit about from your perspective in a lot of the work you've done. Talk to me about magic. Is there magic in the Hebrew Bible or in early Jewish literature?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah. So it's a complicated question, right? Because the term magic is a complicated term.
Yeah.
We have
So
to. So maybe what I will say is that magic is an othering term, right? It was invented by the Greeks to describe what the Persians did, and they hated the Persians.
Right.
And so the Greeks did religion, and the Persians do magia, and it's what the magi do, right? And therefore, it's a term about other. It's what you're not supposed to do. It's the other. It's the enemy, the outsider, the whatever. So, a lot of the language around magic so that's the one thing to note, right? Is that there's always politics wrapped up in this about what is allowed and what is not allowed. Is divination allowed? Well, it depends on the divination. The Urim and Thummim are allowed, but are there other forms of divination not allowed? Right? Well, the Hebrew Bible seems to think that some forms of divination are allowed and some forms are not. But it seems like the category, at least for the Hebrew Bible, that they're worried about is keshef. That seems to be the category that bothers them, is this category of keshef. And this is a weird word because it never really appears as a noun. It almost always appears as a verbal noun, one who does it. The Hebrew Bible very rarely condemns a thing. It tends to condemn people doing it. Don't be one who does this. Right? Don't be a Ma'onin. Right? Yeah, or Yadoni or whatever. Whatever that list in Deuteronomy. And by the way, I'll say that the idea that that there's no magic in the Hebrew Bible is also true of the Septuagint. If you look at that great text section in Deuteronomy 18, where we can go through some of these if you want, where it says, don't be this, don't be that, don't be a chover of chavrim, don't be a Yadoni, don't be a balov. If you look at the Septuagint, they translate it almost always as like one of my favorite ones is don't be a ventriloquist. Like they convert
Awesome.
They convert the word. I think it's literally belly talker.
Wow.
Because they even are rationalizing it away. They don't like the fact that this exists.
Yes.
It's theologically bothersome because if there are these supernatural powers that are outside of the sovereignty of God, then what kind of monotheism are we operating with here? Right? That's theologically worrying to them. I think that's part of what's militating it. But at any rate, we have this category keshef, and again, we never see it. I don't think we very rarely, if ever, see it in the Hebrew Bible in a noun form. We
I just
mostly
looked
see
it up
it
here.
I think we mostly see it as like in Exodus, mecha shefa lo techaye.
Yep.
Right? Don't let a mecha shefa. And if you take that word, right, that's a complicated word because And again, we know this word keshef, by the way, in Greek gets translated as pharmakus, poisoner, right? So like they're also like doing they're doing the rationalizing. But we know this word keshef from Akkadian, kishpu, and we know that in the Akkadian context, it definitely means antisocial supernatural causation. It's a really crappy translation, but kishpu means like antisocial supernatural causation. It's magic or witchcraft, we might say. I don't like using the term witchcraft. But machashefa in Exodus literally means keshef, doing woman. If you want to decompose it into its constitutive parts, right? It's keshef, doing woman. Don't let her live.
I mean, if you believe the sages, all women know magic. Just
right,
by default. We just come with that stat pre-installed, apparently.
Right. The more women, the more witchcraft. And Egyptians too, right? The Egyptians got the majority of witchcraft given to them. But I think what's interesting, and again, we can take a look at this line at Deuteronomy 18. And this line is this is Deuteronomy 18, 10, and 11. I have it pulled up on Safari here.
Yep. I was going to say, do you want to share your screen?
Put it on the screen
to do that.
Yeah, I can throw it up if you want. I don't know if I have the.
Go for it. Yeah, there should be a little button next to your little thumbnail.
There it is.
That did
you
it.
Got it, Vish?
All right.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, so if we take a look at some of these, the prohibition here, right? And as I say on my channel, prohibition always indicates practice. You don't prohibit what people aren't doing. One time I love driving across Lake Pontchartrain in New Orleans, and because there's a sign that says "Do not jump off bridge," and I always wondered how many people had to jump off the bridge before they put the sign up.
Or the sign got put up. Yeah.
And so this prohibition tells me that there are people doing this because, again, you don't prohibit stuff that, and they're Israelites doing it, right? Not just randos, but Israelites doing it. But if you look at a lot of these, there's passing the sun and the daughter through the fire. So that's the Lomela, that's the Lomolach ritual, probably a reference to that. But then you get these strange things like a kosamim, like whatever that means exactly, right? It's some technical thing. A menachesh, don't be a menachesh. This is probably root word is probably nachash, snake. Yeah. So it's something about snakes. Snake doer person. Yeah. It's not clear what that is. Don't be a machashef. Don't be a sorcerer. That's there in the masculine form, right? So it's also you can't be a warlock. V'chover chaver. It's from friend. It's from the word friend. Don't be a and by the way, that term, the chaver, does get used most famously in Tractate Sanhedrin in the Talmud. This is a bit of a detour, but it's a pertinent detour. So folks know these are all death penalty cases, right? If you commit any of these sins, you're subject to the death penalty. And so because it's a death penalty case, these are all covered in Tractate Sanhedrin and the Talmud. And they have to go through and try to figure out what all these mean. And they have lots of debates about what these mean, right? It says don't be a Yidaoni, as Vish said, right? And they interpret it to mean like a kind of bone from an animal that they put in their mouth to talk to the dead. Because there's a Yadua that they mainly use as bone, but we don't know what a Yidaoni is. It's completely speculative what a Yidaoni is. But at any rate, they go through all of these and say, well, if these are all forbidden as keshef, these are all forbidden keshef, then anything else is allowed. Because, right, you can only do what's forbidden. You can only not do what's forbidden if it's not forbidden what's allowed. Do you guys know what the one thing that they give an example for that is allowed?
I do not.
Making golems is the example of the thing that you're allowed to do. And it says in the Gemara that these rabbis studied Hilchot Yetzirah, and they made a man, and they sent the man, and he couldn't talk. And when the rabbi replies in the English, it'll say something like, "Oh, you're one of from the sorcerers," but it doesn't say sorcerers in Aramaic. It says chavrusa. You're one of the companions. That is the word chover.
Yeah.
right?
Wow. That's cool.
Don't be. Yeah, it's a funny example of a thing that's allowed. Don't be an ov. Golem's always permissible. Although, interestingly enough, halakhically, golems can't count to a minion. That is a legal ruling in Judaism. You can't count a golem in a minion. But anyway, you have the ov, you have the idoni, which is interesting here too. And the ov, the root. I mean, the shorish. I think there's from av, probably father. I think. I mean, there's a vav, cholim vav there. That's weird, but I think it means like ancestors. Maybe I think that's the sense of it, like dead ancestors. But it's a guess. But also says don't doresh hamesim, doresh hametim. Don't consult. Don't seek after the dead.
Seek after the dead.
Yeah. Don't seek after the dead. Which is interesting because if ov is something to do with necromancy, and we have good reason to believe that it is something to do with necromancy, because the only character in the Hebrew Bible that we see practicing something like magic is the Baalat Ov at Endor. And she's referred to as a Baalat Ov, which I hate the translation witch of Endor.
Right.
We should just leave it in Hebrew, I think, because it's a technical term clearly from here, right?
Agree. Yep.
So the question is there magic in the Hebrew Bible? There's kishuf, right? And there are these technical things you're not allowed to do, like a ma'onin. It has something to do with clouds. It might be divination via clouds or maybe birds. That's why they translated it in the Septuagint, by the way. They translated it as bird divination in the Septuagint. But the fact that even in the Septuagint, they don't know what it is. They're having to they translate this as they translate one of these. I think it's I forget, it was Kosem.
Menachesh. Oh, Kosem.
Kosem. No, Menachesh they translate as pharmacus, poisoner. But they translate.
If they translate that as birds in the Septuagint, right?
I think that the one they translate is the ma'onin, is the bird one.
Ma'onin, yeah. So
from the root anan, which makes sense.
Yeah, augury.
Right, augury, having to. But is it augury? Yeah. Is it looking at the intestines of animals? Not really. It's the Hebrew doesn't indicate that, which tells me that even by the composition of the Septuagint, they didn't know what this stuff was.
They didn't know what half this stuff was. Yeah.
Yep. They had to fudge a translation. Or at least they were accommodating the translation to categories that existed in Greek or something. So there is magic in the Hebrew Bible, the Baalat Ov, which even that story is really weird because she summons the spirit of the prophet Samuel, and when she sees the spirit coming out of the earth, she doesn't call it a ruach or whatever.
No, it's an Elohim.
It's an Elohim.
Yeah.
And they never translate it that way in English.
No.
They say nope. There is a God coming out of the earth is what I think the Hebrew literally says.
Yeah.
So there is keshef, and there are these specific kinds of practices. There's a couple another list in Leviticus, I think. But I think what's fascinating about this is that by the time the Septuagint gets translated and by the time the rabbis are writing commentaries on this, they don't know what it is either. And what's interesting about this is that when this gets translated into European circumstances, it means that all magic gets forbidden because this is taken to be a catch-all for any kind of supernatural causation stuff. But in Jewish law, it says only these specific things are forbidden. And because we don't know exactly what they are, there's enormous halachic legal wiggle room to do all kinds of weird stuff.
Boy.
Like, exorcisms and amulets, sagulot,
right.
and amulets and all kinds of stuff. Summoning golems and stuff. It's a totally different legal and metaphysical trajectory, which just shows you that we think that these texts are written in stone, but in some sense, because these laws were written using such technical language, and that technical language was apparently lost at some point, we get totally different trajectories in the history of how this stuff shakes itself out culturally. where, you don't see, there are no prohibitions in Judaism about making amulets. Even Maimonides says they don't work, but they might help people. It's against one of the earliest examples.
Well,
doctor.
Well, he says that they don't work, but he says that people believe they might work, and therefore they might help a patient survive. It's the first example of invoking the placebo effect.
Placebo effect. Yeah.
And yet we're drawing some, pretty arbitrary distinctions as well between amulets and then the tephilim are effectively ritual texts.
No, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And again, totafot. The totafot is probably an Egyptian word.
Yeah.
I think that the data indicates that is not a native Hebrew word. Totafot is probably an Egyptian technical word for some kind of ritual power. Yeah, or shad, the sotah.
Loan words. Yeah.
We have a whole bunch of those, by the way, in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's over 20 of them. It's
almost like cultures influenced each other and stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean the distinction is where ritual practitioners inside of one system declare this is the line. Mezuzot in, right? Fine. Yeah, like they can protect your house from Shadam. They're in. The Ketefinom amulets,
yes,
those are, I think, to me, those are the outstanding example of this because, and again, I'll put myself out on a limb here. They are the earliest testimony to what becomes the Bible, at least in terms of the priestly benediction, and they might be the earliest instance of the Bible in a form that the Bible might have prohibited.
That's fun. Yeah.
That to me is like the outstanding irony of history. Like, I think if you were to go to ask the Leviticus, can you have a silver amulet with the divine name written on it in a tomb? I think P would have said, absolutely not. It would have horrified them.
Yes.
The most unclean thing, right? The tahara is it's the most tahara. And yet, right? That to me is the most hilarious thing. The author of Leviticus would have clearly forbidden something like that. And yet, that's the earliest place where you find a quotation of the Bible. Again, with all appropriate scare quotes or whatever. And that to me is just what I love about this stuff. Is that it's a kind of performative contradiction. Like history is a performative contradiction.
Oh, totally. It's not so dissimilar. I've said this a few times. How fun it is that perhaps one of the most clearly attested historical figures known only from the Bible happens to be Balaam, the prophet from Moab, right? So, the ironing is delicious, as they say.
And we have a prophecy from him outside of Hebrew Bible, right? The Der Allah inscription,
or the Der Allah inscription,
inscription on the plaster.
So, which uses all those important keywords, like Shadim and El, and there's another one in there too. Lawrence did a lot of work on this, so if he's still in here, he'll pull up a bunch of correspondence. But it's very cool.
I think it just means that we need to do the work, and this is why I said, like, I don't like the Ba'alat Ov being translated as the witch of Endor, because that word witch carries all this baggage of the early modern witch trials, and it's like a religious practice of people now that it's a practice that people find enormous spiritual value in, and when the Hebrew Bible uses a technical term, we either need, in my opinion, to just leave it in Hebrew and let it be a technical term and let it be unusual, or we need to find words that aren't so laden, like witch or magic. And the joke that I tell people is, people ask me, like, how do you know when to trust a Bible translation? And the joke I tell is to open it up to the book of Job And at the bottom of every page, if it doesn't say meaning of Hebrew uncertain about 20 times, you can just throw it in the trash. You can just throw that one in the trash. And I feel like with these terms, like in Job, there's a desire to there's this like translators feel pressure from their audience that shouldn't be there. Translators should say Ba'alat Ov has no translation in English. Just doesn't exist. There's no term for whatever that was. Just leave it there. Just leave it. And I think that the more the Bible can be foreign to people, the safer we all are. Because then it means the Bible isn't on your side.
Yeah.
It's
interesting too.
I mean, supposed to say what I wanted to say.
Yeah. The translators are like, they don't have problems with some, technical terms, right? Like hallelujah gets left
Salah.
alone.
We have no idea what Salah means. Yeah, Salah.
Exactly.
Who knows?
We know what
that
hallelujah means, but
yeah,
it just but that's
or the maskil, or they'll leave these terms in the Psalms. They're clearly musical terms.
Yeah,
They'll leave them.
Yeah.
We know what maskil means, kind of, but like they'll leave them in Hebrew. I'm like, just anytime we see, if there's especially if there's a hapax legomena, like unless we have really good reason to translate it, just leave it as a technical term. Sota, like, don't translate it as ordeal. That's a medieval, pre-medieval thing, and it is an ordeal, strictly speaking, by the definition of the Fourth Lateran Council. But it also loads in medieval canon law into an Iron Age Middle Eastern text. There's no reason to do that. Just leave it as the Sota, and let it be weird, because the expectation that the past not be weird is bizarre, especially a past that you have no connection to. The ancient temple cult in Israel. Even the most pious Jew has no connection to that world.
No connection. No. Thousands of years removed. It's for most of us here, it comes from an entirely different place on a different continent. From a Protestant perspective, where I come from, all these texts are written in languages none of most of the adherents know or can read. I often say that when I taught my Hebrew religions course, that's where I would start, was by saying this world is much more foreign to us than any foreign culture from us as North Americans today. Like the modern Middle East is a much more relatable place compared to the ancient Middle East.
I mean, but even then, there's a level of like agrarian life that even people who live in the region don't necessarily have daily contact with. Like, some of these texts are meant to make you think like agrarian folks. Some of them are meant to make you think like courtly representatives. Some of them are like administrative. Some of them are regal. It's a whole grab bag of stuff, and there's not one single person that can be all of those at the same time. So it's a completely different mindset. And I have a lot of frustration with like modern translations when it comes to your prayer book or comes to the text, because they try to like put it in terms that we can understand. And I think that does a disservice to people engaging with it, because it's supposed to be foreign. It's supposed to not be relatable to the modern era. It wasn't written now. It was written in the Iron Age, right? Yeah. And I feel like if you want to really engage with something and relate to it, you need to engage with it on its own terms and not make it meet you. You kind of need to like go to where it is to get a more like coherent picture. That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, I mean, most I agree with you. Most people have never seen an animal slaughtered, and that's the central point of
or
the
smelled animals slaughtered.
Smelled animal
Right.
slaughtered, like smelled entrails being burned. I'm like, I'm like, if you want to know what the temple smelled like, just go to a slaughterhouse and a barbecue place.
Or my grandma's house. She used to ring next and
ring.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Talmud says that one of the greatest miracles in the history of the temple was that a woman never fainted because of the smell.
Okay.
That's awesome.
That gives you a sense of what it smelled like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of my favorite, there's like 10 miracles associated with the temple, and that's one of them, that no woman ever fainted from the smell.
I have two answers for this. Either the women weren't allowed close enough to smell it, or it was just all dudes fainting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that women definitely fainted. People fainted.
Yeah. They absolutely did.
Yeah. I mean,
like there's people today that can't go into the medical profession because they faint at the sight of blood or they vomit. And it's like, that just happens to some folks. Like,
again, that to me is like one of the things that really speaks to the foreignness of it. Or the Sota ritual, like the Sota ritual, I think is a great example of something that we look at. And again, I love how in Judaism, in Christianity, they can write this off as a ritual text, and therefore it doesn't have to be dealt with at all, right? That's the wonderful move that gets made in early Christianity, is that the ethical stuff is continued, but the ritual stuff is suspended by Jesus, and therefore it doesn't require any sort of commentary. That's not true in Judaism. All the ritual, so-called ritual stuff is required you have to learn about it because the temple's going to come back, of course. And I love the fact that, again, I'll go back to Maimonides. Maimonides is so horrified by the Sota ritual that he actually argues that that it doesn't work, that it never worked, that it was actually just meant to be meant to be sort of a
prophylactic,
or like it was like the Israelites were addicted to idolatry. They'd only known idolatry in Egypt, and therefore they had to be weaned off idolatry. And men are so crazy that the only thing that will satisfy them is bizarre rituals to, like, because that's what they're used to, right? They're in Egypt, they all are used to these, again, as a man probably writing this in Egypt, right? And he says, like, it doesn't work. It never worked. No one was ever found guilty of this because it didn't work. And therefore, it was just meant to basically be a mechanism by which women who were facing, like, you could be put to the death penalty for this, that it was basically an escape clause in the Torah.
Hey man, it's just like the Ben Soru Mored. No one's ever qualified. Yeah. If you saw, if you sat on a stone and saw some guy, no, you didn't.
Yep. Yeah, that's the same. Yeah, same with the rebellious child.
Yeah.
That there's simply no rebellious child ever. But the Sota is the same. But again, I think like the interesting thing about the ritual, at least when we find it in Numbers, is that was a ritual they did. Like that was, I think, I don't think you like make up stuff. I don't think the stuff is typically born out of whole cloth. But I think that, again, if you were looking from the outside and you imagine Yahweh as being a regionally dependent deity, I don't know how that's not magic from looking at it from the outside,
Sure.
And even the mechanism, by the way, I love the fact that the Hebrew, I forget how it gets translated into English, but the Hebrew means something like to turn her stomach upside down. Like I forget the exact Hebrew. It's like
it's causing your side or your flank to fall off. Like it's supposed to rot and fall off. And I think that's
something. I forget.
Your genitals.
Yeah, it's whatever it is. It's either a technical term or a euphemism. I don't have it in front of me. But I like the fact that even what it's supposed to do isn't clear. Let's see if I can.
One of the things that as like a manuscript and a Scrabble guy that captures my attention in the Sota ritual is that the priest, we're told, write something down on what is it he's writing on?
I think it's a clock.
He writes something. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up in front of me.
Where is it here? I am too.
Oh,
now.
I mean, it just like he takes water from the floor and then he
Yes.
whatever he writes, he has to scrape it, into the thing and make her drink it. It's like, this is very full of
Yes.
magic.
So
You know?
yeah, exactly. The fact that he
Yeah.
writes it down, and then he scrapes off whatever he's written into the potion, the bitter waters. Because I think it speaks rather powerfully to this mindset within antiquity that persisted, insofar as just the mysteriousness of writing and texts, and I guess this numinous quality that they continue to have, where it's almost as if the writing itself becomes part of the actual potion.
Yeah, I mean it's the bitter and waters that, and again, and it's yeah, it induces the hamarim, the spoken thing, incantation. I mean, that's
Yes.
really what. Yeah.
It doesn't say necessarily what you're writing on. It just says write it in a sefer. So.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But also, I'm wondering how long this is supposed to take, because the ink has to dry first before you can scrape it off. So
yeah, I guess so.
Because otherwise, it's just going to smear everywhere.
Yeah, it shouldn't take too long. Yeah, you write it.
It's probably not. It's probably not cuneiform on a clay tablet.
No.
We can be fairly clear about that.
It's also an interesting thing I learned recently is that there's no examples of the name Yahweh ever appearing on a cuneiform tablet.
Ooh.
That's true. Yeah.
It's weird. I mean, of the 500,000 cuneiform tablets that have been recovered, the name Yahweh, no, even on the Judean, there's 150 some odd Judean tablets from Yahud and Babylon. The name never appears on a single document. It's so fascinating.
Wild, eh?
Yeah, it's just weird. It's just
that is strange.
Yeah, things like that just always jump out at me. I'm like, what?
Our cuneiform friend says Yah appears in Ebla.
Oh. That's
neat. Should call Dr. Josh.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Just call him right now. Hey, Josh, we have a question.
In the 500,000 cuneiform tablets. I mean, not that only a quarter of them have ever been translated. So
yeah,
they might be in the half.
It's still out there, guys.
Yeah.
Yep.
You never know.
The one, it's still out there. Yeah. Well, do you want to get to some questions? We got a bunch.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, or in my mind, I was gonna bring up some of the questions and stuff.
All right.
And I guess maybe the one of the last things I'll say just before we jump over to the questions is that what's also interesting is that the way we conceive of the Qumran community as being super pious, right? Like all about that purity life, all about that, we are the chosen people. We are the,
the sons of light.
The sons of light. Like we're it, right? We're the real Jews. Yep. Like everyone else is like a faker and they're all going to die. And we're going to be the ones that are going to and they have exorcistic texts. They have, like we mentioned, these horoscopic texts. We have these brontologion texts, these physiognomical texts, and written in cryptic script. And the only one of the only other examples of a literary text in cryptic script, if I remember correctly, is the words of the Maskil, the one of the the leader of the community.
Yes,
that's written in cryptic script.
Yeah,
and so that to me is clearly those texts were meant to be esoteric. They're written clearly in a script that not many people can read. And they're doing what we would now consider divination.
Right.
And that to me is if those are the folks who we think of as being the most machmir, most strict, the world's going to end and we got to be ritually pure all the time. It's about to really come to an end. And they're also doing horoscopes and stuff. And these brontologion, it just tells us, to me, it tells me that the categories of what is allowed and what is not allowed, we don't really understand them. We don't understand
No, I don't
them
think so.
because
And isn't that awesome?
Yeah. It's just, that to me is like, what? Like, you think you have these clear delineated categories of what it is allowed and what isn't allowed, and what is magic and what is not, and what is divination and what is not divination. And if the Qumran community is a group of people that took that stuff very seriously, and we have every reason to believe they did, the leadership of that community felt sufficiently okay with that to put it in their texts in this cryptic script. Maybe it wasn't for the hoi polloi, right? The Amcha. But at least the leadership felt that it was something that was not just not forbidden, but worthy of some kind of investigation. I don't know. That to me is fascinating.
Yeah. Before we move on to, I'm going to say something else about the cryptic texts here. When people go looking for this stuff, you're going to find that some figures are that there's like 30 individual manuscripts of these cryptic texts. That's probably wrong. And the reason that's wrong is because the guy who Stephen Fawn is the scholar who edited these manuscripts when they were first published, and for whatever reason, he decided when he was looking at them that he saw some pretty fine differences in the scripts, enough to convince him that he was dealing with like 22 different scribes or something like that. And there's probably actually only like all those fragments don't actually, it was almost like every single individual fragment represented an individual manuscript when he published this. That's probably wrong. I think there's, when I looked at them, I figured I think there's probably like 3 manuscripts among
but there are 2 cryptic scripts though, I think, that do that do correspond to different texts. So they look similar in that they're both, they look similar, but there are different, they're cryptographically different. And there's that bowl they found in Jerusalem that had another cryptic script on it, which is also like right, which seems to be connected to the Jerusalem priesthood and also written in a cryptic script, and who knows what that means.
What were those guys doing?
Yeah, there was weird shenanigans going on in that.
Magic.
There really was.
Yeah. Love that.
So,
okay.
Very cool.
So yeah, we have a pretty fair number of questions. This one's from Chuck XV for 25. Let me make sure to get it up there on the screen.
Chuck is one of my Hebrew students, by the way.
Yeah. Dr. Sledge, have you ever seen the Joseph Smith treasure digging, quote, protection parchments, aka holiness to the Lord parchment? What do you suspect the source material or exemplar? If not, please do a deep dive sometime.
Yeah, so I have seen some of these. So Joseph Smith was pretty Freemasoned up, and it seems like some of that stuff is coming from Freemasonry via maybe some Solomonic magic, and also maybe via Francis Bartlett's The Magus. Famously, Joseph Smith had I think the sigil of Jupiter on him when he was killed, and that's taken from the Bartlett's The Magus, and that text, of course, goes back to Cornelius Agrippa. So yeah, there's a whole episode I'm going to do on the occult origins of the LDS movement in a way that's not insulting, obviously, to the LDS movement, because I do think that there's I think that the LDS Church is an authentically esoteric American religion, and you would never get that from. Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, in many ways, like it is like, I mean, when I say American, I mean like the LDS Church accepts the Declaration of Independence as a divinely revealed document. So it is American, like hardcore American. So yeah, I'm going to be doing that episode at some point soon. But yeah, I've seen these. Folks may know this, that before Joseph Smith was a prophet, he was a treasure finder, and he used magic to find treasure. And before he was known as Joseph Smith, he was known as Peepstone Joe, where he used a stone. I'm serious. He was called Peepstone Joe. And he used a stone to find treasure, like a dowsing rod that would be used to find water, but he used a stone. And he used that same stone along with his hat to translate.
This is the seer stone.
The seer stone, yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
That's cool.
So, Joseph Smith was, before he was known as a prophet, he was known as a treasure hunter. And using magic to find treasure was a long-standing tradition in the Western world, because it was generally believed that treasure was almost always magically protected, and therefore you had to have magical means by which to find it.
Cool.
Excellent.
Thanks for the question, Chuck.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I'll correct you for 20. What's up, Kip? Bish questioned Esoterica. Where hallucinations, I'm assuming that's where were hallucinations used in ancient Jewish mysticism or Zoroastrianism? Or maybe that's were, not where.
I think it's were.
Were hallucinations?
Yeah, were
used in ancient Jewish mysticism or Zoroastrianism?
So I can't speak to Zoroastrianism. I'm not an expert there. I can't say anything about that. So I guess there's two questions here. Is when I think about the visions in Ezekiel and Isaiah, do I think those are literary? Do I think those are phenomenological? My sense that they're phenomenological. I don't think they're purely literary. I do think that Ezekiel and Isaiah were priests, and there was some means by which they achieved alterations of consciousness. We can say basically nothing other, at least evidentiarily, there's nothing else to suggest how they might have done that, with the maybe exception that cannabinoids have been found at the Yahweh shrine at
Telerod. Yeah.
But hotboxing,
cannabosum.
Yeah, cannabosum. Yeah, I don't think
get out of here. Get out of here.
False friend central.
Yeah.
However, and this is way post-dated in the Merkava literature, which I'm going to be teaching a class on the Merkava Hechel literature. In the 10th century, there's a rabbi who knows about this literature, and he knows that people are practicing it. Zabini Shchai. And he says that the way that they did it, and this is preserved in Hechelot Zutarti, at least a late manuscript of Hechelot Zutarti, is that he says that they fasted, and that they put their head between they settled down on the ground, they put their head between their legs, and they did some kind of breathing. And when they did this, they descended. And it's only 2 sentences, but is it possible that that's a indication of some kind of breathing technique / fasting? This fast lasts for a few days. Could that kind of stuff induce alterations of consciousness? Sure. But that's it. We don't have, everybody wants to see some evidence of hallucinogenic drugs, and what are they called when Jacob gives to whoever the
mandrake,
the mandrake, whatever that is in Hebrew. We don't know the Hebrew word there is completely weird. They get it's translated as mandrake, but it's not clear what it is. The cannabosem, right? People, the rabbis typically translate it as calamus. That's what Chazal renders it as. Also, cannabis doesn't cause hallucinations in most cases. So I'm skeptical, but also I'm also not of the camp that says that the Hechelit literature and the visions had by Ezekiel and Isaiah are merely like what was the old generation of folks that said the Hechelit literature was just it was just homiletic. It was just used as a homiletic tool, which is bizarre. And I'll give one example of this. Why I think this is the case is that so we have the case of the 4 who entered paradise in or Pardes in Tractate Chagiga in the Talmud, and that story is very famous as an early example of the Hechel literature. If you wind that text back all the way to the earliest strata of the Mishnaic literature, that story is told in the first person. I did this. I did
Love
that.
it.
Yeah.
It's Akiva talking in the first person, and it's not in a Baraita. I forget. It doesn't matter. But at any rate, the fact that the earliest attestations we have of that pericope are in the first person, and then it's eventually transferred into the third person by the time it gets to the Talmud, that's conspicuous to me. And if it is the case that Akiva is doing it, that's the 2nd century dating, right? Akiva is executed sometime not long after Bar Kokhba, or around the time of Bar Kokhba. We don't have to push that needle too much further back to get to Paul and his weird 2 Corinthians third heaven business. So I am of the mind that there is some tradition in Second Temple period Judaism of some mechanism by which to induce an alteration of consciousness, by which to see the throne, because that was clearly the goal of the pilgrimage festivals, was to see the faith. Like that's not rhetoric. That was the goal of the pilgrimages, is to see the face, the panim Yahweh, like. And I think that was a thing that you tried to induce in those pilgrimage festivals. We have evidence in Judges, right, where we have evidence of like the prophets being in altered states of consciousness. Saul is among the prophets, right?
Yeah.
The think that Israelite religion doesn't have a shamanic aspect, and that shamanic aspect got preserved in some ways by the priestly elite. That's just, it would be bizarre if that weren't the case.
It would be strange. Yeah.
So
yeah.
But the evidence is not
the
there.
writers. Yes. About the No, I was going to say the writers and the collectors of the Dead Sea Scrolls too were doing. They're going and hanging out in the celestial temple with the angels.
Yep.
So
how
do you do that?
Yeah, how do you do that? And is there a literary component there? I think, but is there a phenomenological component? I think that there is. But again, do we get to jump immediately to that they were doing DMT? No. Like we don't get you're not entitled to that jump. The evidence the evidence does not suggest that. We don't have them talking about mushrooms. We don't,
we're not burning purple around here.
No burning purple.
Yeah. And so I think that, again, if we found evidence for it tomorrow, would I be surprised? No. I'd be like, yep, that was obviously, something like that was happening. But until we find that evidence, I think we have to remain on that. This is like speculation.
But, and it's not outside the realm of possibility. A lot of cultures use, psychedelics or hallucinogens or, drugs or whatever in their practices. Like that's a very, very common element of people's like practice. So it's not impossible. We just need to find evidence, actual, like, for instance, like the residue you found at Tel Arad.
Right.
That is empirical evidence. If you get more stuff in that vein, or if you find somebody that just pressed it between, pages of their books or something, like, sure.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And alcohol. I mean, we know alcohol is widely used. I mean, we know that we now have archaeological evidence of psychotropic drugs being used in Egypt. That was just published last year. So sure, like Blue Lotus is mildly narcotic.
Yeah.
We know the region has it. It was being used. It would not be surprising at all to me if we find evidence for it. And again, the problem with the Israelite evidence is just that, this is the bad thing about building your temples in the middle of a extraordinarily important crossroads of trade, where empires are happy to destroy everything you have in order to maintain trade routes. It's not good for evidence.
Build on top of it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, get through a few more of these super chats. Lab for 5, is the Latin Vulgate worth deeper study? Jerome used the 4th century Hebrew manuscripts to translate it. Could it have had older textual readings than Vaticanus?
This is not a question I have a ton of knowledge about. Because there's two, the Vulgate, and there's the Vetus Latinus, which is the older, the pre-Jerome. But yeah, I can't imagine why. If you're producing a critical edition, I can't imagine why you wouldn't use the kit and caboodle. But I'm not an expert in this. And we mentioned, Kip and I mentioned this last time, is that Origen, when he was building his Hexaplas, allegedly used a manuscript that was found out near Jericho, which may have been a quote unquote Dead Sea Scroll.
A Dead Sea Scroll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Ooh.
yeah. So yeah, I would say that if you're building a critical edition, you need to use the kit and caboodle. So
hey, Pat Lowinger for 2. Did someone say ritual? I
channel.
heart talks about magic. Oh, Pat.
Good to see you, Pat.
All right. Domingo Vilas for 10 beaver bucks. What are witches in the Hebrew Bible? I read somewhere the Vulgate says maleficos.
right.
Likely the so-called generic masculine, i.e. people who do black magic.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit, right? Is that the term is, at least in feminine, is machashefa, which again, it just means, again, following the Akkadian reading of keshef is kishpu, and again, this word we didn't have a shoresh for this word until we discovered Akkadian, and it just means like malevolent, or what I would call antisocial supernatural causation. And so, if you want to machashefa translated as crappily as you can possibly translate it, it is antisocial supernatural causation woman. But that's what it means. Yeah, it's just awful. But that's what it means, literally. If you take the word down to its like fundamental building blocks. But maleficos just means evildoer. And as I mentioned earlier, when it gets translated to Greek, it's pharmakos, poisoner. And you'll still hear sometimes today people say things like, oh, when it says don't let a witch live, they're not really referring to witches, they're referring to poisoners. And I'm like, well, that's what the Septuagint's referring to.
That's what they thought, yeah.
Right. And of course, pharmakos has a range of, it has a pretty substantial lexical range, but it has some sense of poisoner or making potions and stuff like this.
And she, for 15, any insight into the epic sorcery battles between Moses and Aaron and Pharaoh's magicians, Giannis and Yambres?
Yeah.
Were they able to duplicate what Moshe and Aaron did? And did they do the same thing to the Nile, but was it already done?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's 2 things about that story that jump out to me. Is the first thing is that they were able to do basically what Yahweh could do, which tells me that the writer of that text believed that their gods were powerful enough to do that stuff, but still Yahweh could like whip them, right? My dad can beat up your dad, right? This henotheism, right? Sort of their other god, but our God can beat up your God. So that's the first part of that, and I think also when you see the Song of the Sea, right? Micha mocha ba'elim Adonai, that's not a rhetorical question. I think they're being like, what gods are more powerful than this God? But also notice the word for sorcerer there is charteme paro. It doesn't say machashef paro. It says chartume paro. It's Khartoumim. It's people from Khartoum. It's a geographical designator. It's Sudanese people.
Yeah. Wow.
And I don't know why it gets I mean, it's obvious why it gets translated as sorcerer, but there's another word, machashef, you could use if the Hebrew Bible wanted to, if the writer of that text wanted to use the word sorcerer, they had a word right in front of them. For whatever reason, they use chartume in the construction form, and it's people from Khartoum. It's something about Sudanese people, and I don't know what exactly. I don't think that shoresh. I don't think that word appears anywhere else in the Hebrew Bible, to my knowledge, or at least not in that relationship. But there's something particular about that Exodus story that writer, like maybe ritual experts, were imported from Sudan and into the Pharaonic court, or maybe they thought that they were. But it's a very strange Hebrew term, very particular Hebrew term used in a very strange context that doesn't get repeated again. And again, this is why you got to learn to read, Hebrew, because the translation hides this from you, right? It says Hebrew, his sorcerers. Yeah. But it doesn't. The Hebrew is strange there. At least I think so. I think it's very unusual. Like Khartoum paro.
No, I agree.
This.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Fred RC. Going to be out. this is the gentleman who's arranging the Enochian conference that I'm going to be going to, Kip. So hopefully we'll
Oh,
get to,
nice. The one up
hopefully
here?
yeah, up there. Yep, up where you guys are.
Oh,
So
cool.
hopefully this is a
Excellent.
fine gentleman organizing this amazing conference. So hopefully that'll get me out there and we can all hang out.
I look forward to it.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, the Hartume Paro thing is like, I remember like reading, again, when you're reading Hebrew Bible, and I know you and Dr. Bowen do this, when you're actually just reading Hebrew Bible, sometimes it's so weird. You run into stuff and you're like, what is this?
Yeah. You just kind of have to stop and think through. We don't have, unfortunately, there's never enough time to sit around and think through it, right? When you're streaming. But no, it's true. It's one of the funnest, most rewarding parts about like learning the language, and then being able to read the text is just uncovering all the questions that we continue to have. So
yeah, that's definitely true. You guys are reading prophets too, right? Is that? I remember I clicked on it one time when you guys were allowed to reading.
We just finished. We have read Jeremiah, and we just finished Numbers. We're actually working on Psalm 143 right now, I think. Yeah. So trying to keep things sort of basic. It's geared towards like a second year reading level. So there are limitations on which text that we feel comfortable choosing, but we're also trying to give a wide range of literature as well. Clifton Lee, thank you very much.
Perhaps you've done an ep on, but any thoughts on worldview of Sir Thomas Browne in his particular time and place?
I don't know who Sir Thomas Browne is.
Oh,
I definitely could not do an episode on it because I don't even know who that is. I'm sorry.
You got us, Clifton.
Oh. Yeah, you got us. Yeah, I hate when people donate money and I'm like, I have no idea who that is.
I know. I always feel so bad when I go, I just have no idea.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll check it out.
But thanks, Clifton.
Hank Shaver 20 in the Hebrew Bible, odd things happen that identify Hashem. Example, when he goes to kill Moses, and then there's the circumcision or the iron chariot, or these times where magic might be happening but didn't make it into the story.
Yeah, I mean the pericope with Zipporah is completely a mystery. No one knows what in the world's going on with that. The Zipporah pericope is just
that is weird.
It's the weirdest pericope in the. I mean, even in the Hebrew, I think this is right. Even in the Sefer Torah, where it appears, there's like a weird. I think there's a weird scribal thing that is done to set it off as like strange. I think that's right.
Really?
I don't think it's where the inverted nuns are.
No, that's later.
That's later. It's
that's
like
the Kumad and I were rising, let your energy scatter. That's that part.
Right.
There's like the little dots above.
The dots.
Jacob
maybe
kissing
it's
Esau.
Yeah, I forget exactly. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong about this. But it's such a strange.
Who knows where that is in Genesis? I'll go pull up the manuscript.
Yeah, or in Exodus.
Exodus.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I think even that
it's Exodus 4.
Exodus 4. Okay.
Yeah, but I think in the Sefer Torah it's even noted as weird. I could be wrong about that. I could totally be wrong about that. But yeah, I think that these are cases. I don't know that magic's at work there, and with the Zipporah pericope, I think that it's just a. I mean, I don't know. That's a case where I wonder if there weren't a marginal notation that got worked into the text at some point, where there was like, because if you notice it in the text, it's just literally sandwiched in there.
It really is.
Like
it's just it's like a parenthetical comment. That's just
and I think
this happened and it's done. And
and it has no effect on the rest of the narrative.
Nope.
And it seems to me that maybe it was at some point a marginal notation in some text that worked its way into the actual main text, but I don't know. And I could be wrong about the fact that in the Sefer Torah.
This is the Leningrad Codex. I mean, the only thing that's getting me is right here. Some scraping going on there.
Yeah. Well, the Leningrad Codex is going to be a little different than a Sacred Torah.
Yeah. But usually they'll preserve some of the idiosyncrasies.
Yeah, I'm just going to see really fast if I can pull up a Tikkun, an online Tikkun.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Do you want to grab?
While you're working on,
yeah.
While you're working on that.
While you're doing that.
While you're working on that. Okay. Martin Mensch. What about the powers of the name? When I was in yeshiva, they said the Talmud attributed Yeshu's powers to him writing the 70-letter name of God in his skin.
Oh wow.
Well, there's multiple issues in the Talmud, so which one?
Yeah, well, I mean, they definitely mean like Yushki, as in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, clearly the Israelite God's name had power and underwent taboo replacement relatively early on. Even by the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? They're still writing it, in Paleo Hebrew or whatever. At least in some of those scrolls. But yeah, I mean, and this is also interesting too that you mentioned this idea of Jesus getting his powers from sorcery and using the 7 letters, because there is a magical text that exists. It's later, it's medieval, but it is a Jewish magical text in which you prepare a special garment that gives you all kinds of magical powers, and it involves writing all kinds of magical names of God on this garment. So it's from that time period. But yeah, this is this idea that you can use divine names to cause magical things to happen was ubiquitous in the ancient Near East.
Oh.
That was not unique to Judaism. And the fact that even again, as someone who reads Hebrew, when you read those sections of the New Testament where it says that they will use the name of Jesus to cast out demons and stuff, if you were to read that in its original context, it would be like you will use the name Josh to cast out demons. It would sound, you're like,
it would be very odd, yeah.
But to a Greek reader, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Jesus. That's a weird name, because for Greek readers in their imagination, they associated Jewish words and also not these nomina barbara with magical power, and Jesus would have been a nonsense word to them, and it would have made sense that you could use this otherwise bizarre Hebrew name as a magical word to do magical stuff. But if you're reading and if you sort of back translate that into Aramaic and give it to a Jew, they're like, well, why Yeshua?
Okay.
I know a Yeshua. Right? I know. That's my cousin.
Yeah.
But from
it's
the
like
Greek
the way
point
that
of view,
Hollywood treats Latin is like, oh, that's the ultimate do language.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the Hebrew, and also again, I mean, the Greeks understood the Jews as having this kind of exorcistic power. That's clear from Josephus, right? Like when Josephus wants to pitch the Jews as having real supernatural power, he literally tells a story where this dude Eliezer, they drag a possessed person before, I think, Titus, and Eliezer does his whole ritual where he causes they put a bowl of water in front of him and they bring the demon out of him with a magical ring, and then the demon breaks the water, and it's this whole story in Josephus. And this is in the middle of the Roman war. They just take a break to do this exorcism because and even in, I think it's Pliny, maybe it's one of the classical writers who's and in Palestine, this is a thing. The Syrians are really good at this exorcism. And if you read the Gospel of Mark, overwhelmingly the thing that Jesus does is exorcisms.
That's it. Yeah.
Overwhelmingly. There's no walking on there's not much in the way of walking on water. He never turns water to wine. It's a John thing.
Yeah.
If we only had Mark, it would make total sense to put Jesus alongside every other Jewish exorcist we know about that time period, because that was the thing they were known to do. And even when he brings people back from the dead, they're pretty freshly dead. When he brings a little girl back, she's she just had died, and that's also true
Yeah.
of Elisha and Elijah, right? When they bring
Yes.
when they bring that guy back, it's only 2 times in the Hebrew Bible where someone comes back from the dead. They're very recently dead.
Yep.
And they touch the bones of Elisha or whatever, and they bounce back. So, but yeah, I think
we do love keeping bones around, apparently.
Which again is weird. I mean, again, that story has always struck me as weird, considering the sort of the Tahara, impurity business that it's able. His bones have this ability to do that. But
well, I mean, if you want to keep bones, family members, I guess, are a good option, or failing that, prophets.
It also shows how different. Go ahead, Kip. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say there's a late text where Jeremiah's bones are magic too. In
interesting
Egyptian text. Yeah.
And that idea persists. That idea persists all the way to the Middle Ages. Maimonides' bones were originally held in the Maimonides synagogue, and there were stories in which when Maimonides' body was moved from Cairo to Tiberias, that his toe bone remained in the synagogue, and that people would come and sleep in the room with his toe bone, and he would heal them of all kinds of maladies. So this idea of like healing bones persisted well into the Middle Ages. Oh, he would have roll in his grave.
Yeah. He's like,
they did eventually take his toe bone to Tiberias and reinter it properly.
Okay, good. All right.
Phew.
Okay, well, Mute permits Tad for 5. I don't really have a question. Just great to catch this stream live. Hope we get more conversations from y'all in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Speaking for both of the Southern Jews on the panel, the apostrophe should go right before the A, because it's abbreviating or contracting you all, not ya will. Okay, there are some non-super chat questions. Sorry, that one just kind of, I have to always say something. Okay, Turban Right. My question is based on the Qumran community in reference to the Dead Sea Scrolls. To what extent were there any cultural influences from other kingdoms or societies at this time period?
So I guess outside cultural influences on what the people in the Qumran community were doing, I'm assuming is what the question is asking. I mean, yeah. So there's there've been positive comparisons maybe between them and like the Therapeutae and I mean, I think there's some influences from you see some stuff that survives. I think from like Babylonian mantic sort of stuff taking place in the Qumran text. It's hard to pinpoint really beyond that, in large part again just because we just don't know enough about the intersections of a lot of these cultures in this time and place. But that's a good question.
This one's going to be fun. Cuneiform asks, can someone explain the origin of the Karaites and their relationship with the creation of the Masoretic text? Oh boy.
Yeah, this is the elephant in the room question is the Masoretic text Karaite?
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is we don't know. That we know that the Masoretes as a family, some of them were Karaites, and the Karaites had a special kind of axe to grind when it came to the text, to the Hebrew Bible. It's kind of their whole bit.
For those in the audience who don't know what a Karaite Jew is, would you just summarize really quick?
Karaite Jews are Jews who rejected rabbinical Judaism, so they reject the authority of the Mishnah and the Talmud. They reject the authority of the oral Torah, the Torah Shebaal Peh, and so which is ironic considering they reinvent their own.
Chacham. Their own.
Like, we don't have rabbis, we have Chachamim. I'm like, sure
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Distinction, not a difference, but okay.
It's like I don't see a lot of light between those two. But yeah, there's some connection, but the connection again is like relatively relatively weak. We know that there's some connection. But would it make any difference? I mean, I don't know that it. To me, I don't know that it makes much difference that that if it's potentially a Karaite text, because it's not a Karaite text. It's just a text that that attempts to take the Hebrew Bible as they had it and make it make sense, given the manuscript tradition, and given the fact that that the language had changed. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Like the pronoun, right? He, who, and he, right? Like if you take a look at that pronoun in the Masoretic text, it's spelled with a vav. Like it's not. They preserved the consonantal reading, but they knew that the pointing would make it not make sense anymore, and so they had to like do all kinds of funny shenanigans to like change it. And Kip, of course, knows this from where they literally change things in the grammar because they don't like the way that it sounds, or because it disagree with them for whatever reason. The examples in Jeremiah, where Jeremiah was railing against foreign kings and stuff.
Yeah.
So, because I don't happen to believe that the Masoretic text fell out of heaven, you know,
not like the Protestants.
Yeah.
So.
And also, I don't think rabbinical Judaism also thinks that it fell out of heaven. I mean, if you look at the way that the Midrash literature deals with it, it'll tell you, don't read this, read this.
Right.
It's openly disagreeing and negotiating with the Masoretic text. So, you know, the Masoretic text is not a hill I feel the need to die on, textually or religiously, frankly.
Cool. All right. And whoops. Here we go. Chrissy's
in the house.
Eblite literature and culture is so specialized most people don't know anything about it. That's from way earlier in the stream, but I hit a star on it, so I decided to read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and there's even debates about whether or not Eblite is a distinct language, right? This is a big, you know, if you want to get into fisticuffs at the SBL, you know, stand loudly and declare that Eblite is in fact nothing but Akkadian. It's just Western Akkadian. Someone will fight you.
I double dog dare you to start a fight over this at SBL.
Whether or not
Eblite it'd be easy, right? But yes.
I mean,
why don't you and Matt Monger just like fake one, like do it in complete kayfabe in the lobby or something, just for laughs.
I saw a great meme that says like if you ever get bored among a bunch of guys, just say like, look, why don't we just print more money? Just watch the guys go. With Eblite, but I've been learning I was learning all kinds of interesting things about. I did this episode just last week on these really early libraries, and even learning that like I learned about this totally distinct form of Sumerian spelling called because I think most people who know something about Sumerian, they know about Emisal, which is a distinct form of pronouncing Sumerian, often in a ritual context, often spoken by women. But there's a totally distinct form of Sumerian orthography called UGN, which I didn't know anything about. And I started looking into it, and it's just like, imagine if we literally had a totally different way of spelling our entire language, and they were just text written in that different spelling. It's so weird. I mean, and Sumerian had it. It's called UGN orthography. It's like so weird.
We summoned cuneiform. Eblite was first written in Sumerian because it was conquered before Akkad, and the way Eblite is translated into Sumeria was different than the way Eastern Semitic was translated.
Yeah. Yeah. And also we have like cool text in the Eblite libraries where they're writing phonetically in Sumerian, like ritual texts that need to be read out loud. And so they're not using any ideographs at all. So that gives us actually a really good clue into what Sumerian really sounded like, which is such cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed some. They looked wackadoo at first, but like when I was reading through some of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Psalms, they spell words that we would see in the Masoretic text indicated with like the vowel pointing. So you'll see the kaf and the hey ending words a lot, where in the Masoretic you would just see a final kaf with a, the vowel marking underneath, and that threw me off at first. I was like, what the heck? What am I looking at? And then I sounded it out and went, okay. So
the long orthography.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't see enough people so far in the literature that I've been trying to collect on my computer. I haven't found enough people discussing this to my satisfaction. So,
which the orthography,
the long orthography,
the long orthography.
Yeah, in the one particular psalm that I was looking at. There's very specific questions that I have for the Ashrei that I'm not seeing, because the early papers were just obsessed with canonicity, and I could not give less of a crap about canon or what people think is or isn't canon. But there were other things that I was looking for, and there's like a reference here and there in some papers as you go on, but I'm like, nobody's writing the things that I want them to write, so dang it, don't make me do it yourself.
You gotta do it yourself.
No!
Yeah, and also just Hebrew spelling, there's no rules for that. I mean, like, like people talk defective spelling. I'm like, defective indicates that there was a right way of doing it.
Yeah.
people just wrote this any way it sounded to them.
Yeah, they have a standard,
like, oh, this is defectively spelled. I'm like, defective by who? And also, there's whole other systems of vowel pointing. I mean, the Babylonian system of vowel notation is totally different. The vowels are on top. Most people have never seen Babylonian.
That's messed up.
Most people, when you hand someone a system in Babylonian vowel notation, they're like, "What is this?" But the Nicodemus are at the top.
Yeah, we saw one of those in one of my history classes, I think, last year, and everyone just, it was funny. It would be like seeing music notation flipped, for any musicians. If you're used to seeing, like, volume is below the lines, below the staff, and, like, accent marks are above, and you don't flip them, and it's just weird if people do, so.
Yep.
Okay, a couple more came in reference to the guy that none of us knew. It's the
Sir
English
Thomas
polymath
Brown.
author. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Clifton sent in another super chat.
Nice.
So
I have to look him up.
Okay, hang on, getting there. Hey, for Chief for Two, who does it best? Constantine, Hellboy, or Fox Mulder? My vote's for Constantine.
See, I have to confess, I haven't actually seen Constantine.
I haven't either.
Oh man, it's good.
Or Hellboy, but I definitely grew up watching the X-Files. So
me too.
Like, Mulder wins by default. I'm not sure that's like a good thing. Sorry, Mulder.
See, that's where I was gonna go too, but and it's probably showing my age a bit, but yeah.
Dapper, we'll add the Hellboy and Constantine movies to the queue.
To the list. Well, I've seen Hellboy. But,
okay, cool. The first and the second one?
Never seen Constantine. Yes. So.
Okay, good. All right, so we just need to show you Constantine then. All right, I'm gonna. We've been taking Kip through some classic genre films over the last few months, so the list is growing ever longer, but that's good. So
these kids are a little younger than me, Justin. So.
Yeah, me too. I'm also. I don't know when you were born, Kip, but I'm like I was born in '81, so I'm definitely like getting old.
You're like an exennial. I'm only a few years behind you.
Yeah, I'm even older.
Kip's a Gen Xer, 100,000%, but he's boomer coded.
I'm 100%. Yes. It's embarrassing most of the time.
I've been his journey for 222.
No, I don't mind being scholarship. No, I'm like all about, like, I love like being the last generation to have like a analog childhood but a digital adulthood.
Yeah.
Like I remember like cool. Yeah. I remember like the only computer in my entire elementary school was in the theater room, and it was like the only computer we had. It was the one.
We had the library one, and it was not great. And then we had a computer lab. And when people talk about floppy disks, I'm like, yeah, I remember when they were floppy.
Yeah,
5-inch.
They were like, five inch of floppy disks.
Yep, I remember those days.
The disk drive. Yeah, the disk drive for the floppy drive we had for our Commodore 64 was like the size of a toaster.
Yeah. The Commodore 64 was a fantastic machine. This is speaking of esoteric stuff, is that in my spare time when I'm spare time. That's a funny thing to say.
What's that?
But I've heard rumors about this thing called spare time. Legends. Whispers in the East. But yeah, when I do have spare time, when my family like goes on a vacation without me or whatever, the thing I do is like nerd out, and I'm teaching myself to program in 6502, which is like the assembly code for the NES. It's not
cool.
quite the 6502
Dang,
is not
that's
quite.
niche. I love
Wow.
it.
So do you guys know the Book of You? Do you know this Gnostic text? 5th
I don't.
century.
I think I've heard of that. The YU
No.
Book of You.
Yeah, EIU. But it's like it's one of the Gnostic texts that was recovered before Nag Hammadi. So it's in the Bruce Codex, and and it's it's illustrated. It's the only illustrated Gnostic book that we have. But it's a whole series of like treasuries the soul has to climb through before you can eventually leave this realm. But it requires like passwords and all kinds of stuff. And I want to make an NES game based on this like Gnostic text.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh my god!
I like
Where
it.
you have to like literally climb.
Yeah.
It's like a Gnostic journey on the NES, but like
Oh my
actually
gosh,
based on
wait,
the actual
that's-
Coptic text. This
That's
is
very
like
cool.
how I combine the most nerdy things I can imagine into one
Absolutely.
Yes.
thing.
That's the you're doing it right. You
Yeah.
really are.
Just compound the nerdness.
That it's
This is good.
peak nerdness. That's,
Yep.
that's the way to go.
It is peak nerdness,
Well-
but
Yeah.
do you even know us?
Yep.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is going to be awesome. The chat's
Well, we've
getting really
been-
excited about it.
Yeah. If it ever gets done,
fact,
you know, again,
This is
Nestic.
Ne-
I'm not a
nestic.
Gnostic. I'm a Nestic.
Beautiful.
nestic. Yes, good.
Perfect.
But yeah, when it gets
chat,
done,
I
when
love it,
I
I
get my 6502 gets good enough, it's a tough language. I grew up on C and C++, and I remember getting like that stuff. But I mean, it's also if you really want to program for like 4K, you have to be damn good. I mean, like
wow.
those kind of constraints are tough. But anyway, it's a welcome release from, you know, this week, you know, reading medieval mystics and stuff. It's like a totally different kind of weird.
All right. My infinite journey for 222. Hail Nero, Kip, Vish, Justin, and scholarship. Agreed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's one more.
Hey, Clifton with a
there's,
follow-up. I
Yep.
guess I think of Sir Thomas Browne as a sort of 17th century proto Justin Sledge, polymath, obsesses with queen
Nice.
punks. See his Garden of Cyrus.
Interesting. Well, it's
I only
good
know of that word from like astrology. So is there another context that I might be missing?
I have to check it out. I mean, there's so many people like
Okay.
this. And this is the thing that, you know, again, the more that you dig into the history of esotericism, the more you realize that none of this stuff was very esoteric actually in its own time. People are like, oh yeah, that's just the sorcery guy. Everybody knows him. Like, you know,
It's
it's
the
like,
guy who stares into crystal balls.
I'm like, yeah, that's the crystal ball, dude. Yeah, I know him. Like,
Yeah.
or golems are a great example. Like, almost every example of golems that we know of are like housekeepers. They're just like,
Stony Joe.
yeah, they're like Solomon M. Gabriel was like, I need a housekeeper. My wife doesn't. I'm not gonna make my wife do it, so I'm gonna get a golem to do it. So he like makes a golem to
Why
like clean his
not?
house. Yeah, it's just like a robot.
I bet his wife was like, yes.
Yes, not gonna go do more exciting things than clean your stupid laundry.
You know, I already have a deep like appreciation for Ibn Gabriel. So, because I'm like I mentioned before the stream, I love Putim and I love like Sephardic medieval writings. And yeah, I have a whole soapbox about like modern Siddur cutting out most of the Putim. I still am like, why would you do that? So angry.
Yeah, most people don't read them. It's a pity.
My unfinished sock for 2. Don't mangle the Bible. Like and share instead. Meat permits Tad for 2. The sorcery guy also describes Justin. You do make apotropaic bowls, so
yeah, I did make some. We were going to talk about incantation bowls. I did, you know, again, speaking of, you know, strange things, I remember reading about them and I was like, these should be available. And so I literally translated a novel incantation into Aramaic based on the original bowls.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's like the bowls that I hired a ceramicist to make them, but yeah, they have a custom esoterica incantation in Aramaic. and even like intentionally like misspelled them the way that they were like the
Oh,
Aramaic of the incantation bowls are like often like misspelled not the right way. Is that the going theory is that they were probably made by women, and that women wrote Aramaic the way that it sounded, not the way that it was supposed to be written. And therefore there are these idiosyncrasies. Yeah, supposed to be. It's not literary Aramaic. It's not the Aramaic of the Bavli, but so when I translated it, I had to look at the actual original bowls and translate it into the Aramaic, and then use the orthography typical of the bowls. Which, by the way, if this is the case, if the bowls, first of all, the bowl literature, if it, insofar as it is a Jewish literature, it's only second to the Talmud in terms of size. So it is a huge literature.
Yeah, there's so many of these.
So many of them. And if it is,
I wish y'all hadn't told me that. Next time I'm going to go down a rabbit trail learning about this. Dang it.
And if they were primarily written by women, it would make it the largest collection of Jewish women's literature.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is also
now y'all really did it.
It's really a totally slept on aspect of Jewish literature. Is that the incantation bowl literature is the maybe the largest collection of Jewish women's literature in history.
Y'all can't tell me that. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, and I'm going to disappear for like 5 years, and I'm going to come back and be like, yo, I translated all of them, and I compiled them in this book, and I have all these essays about it, and actually that just,
You good, Shal Shaked and those guys, I'm sure would be greatly happy.
I'm just going to go into the orchard for a few years. I'll come back.
Come back
and have the whole thing done.
Yeah, be careful.
Give me 40 days. Not long enough to go insane or whatever.
Yeah, cut the roots.
Yeah, exactly. Furry Fatal says, we got house golems before GTA 6.
That's funny.
Gamer jokes. Okay, so there's this one that Simone had asked earlier, and I want to make sure
Let's do this one. And then we should probably
start to wrap. Okay. Yeah. Any thoughts on the Eun circle and the unique Cherub circle? They're kind of hard to find stuff about.
I have episodes on both of them.
Oh.
Yep, I have episodes on the Eun circle and the unique Cherub circle. So if you're interested, yes, they are difficult to find. They are difficult to find information about, but the Eun circle is covered. No, my brain's failing. I can't remember the name of the book. Joseph Don has covered. He's the scholar who's really covered the unique Cherub circle. But if you go to my channel, go to Esoterica and just look up Eun circle and unique Cherub circle. I have episodes about both of them.
Awesome.
Yeah, the Eun circle is interesting because they postulated that there were 13 Sphirot, not 10. The number eventually settled in on 10, but they postulated there were 13, which or was it 11? I can't remember. Whatever. But the Eun circle is a fascinating sort of pro-Kabbalistic group. But them and the unique Cherub circle, they're sort of part of they're downstream of this Jewish bitheism that began probably with the two powers in heaven stuff.
Ooh.
Okay.
That's
Peter
cool.
Schaeffer and all that sort of two powers in heaven.
Yeah.
They seem to be downstream of that. But up in Ashkenaz, up in Germany, that they believe that there was a transcendent God, and that for God to reveal God's self, God had to basically emanate a unique Keruv.
Right.
And this unique Keruv was like Yahweh Katan, sort of 30 Knock style angel.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, neat stuff. Weird stuff. Yeah, deep cuts in the history of Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
Jewish bitheism is the most slept on.
Boy.
Yeah. That stuff, the Jewish bitheism stuff, to me is the most slept on, weird. And in fact, I would say it's slept on to the point in which, like, I think it existed much earlier than we think it did, and I think that the Jesus movement was only really possible because of some version of like latent
Something
Jewish
like
bitheism.
that.
Yeah, I think it existed in Philo. Yeah.
Potentially,
my personal stance is that Christianity is the only apocalyptic sect that survived out of all of them and is still going into the modern age. And people are like, well, Christianity doesn't really change, or it doesn't do this or that or the other. Like, there's, those people. And it's like, look, when you start with apocalypticism as like your base, you're going to have to eventually reckon with the fact that the apocalypse didn't happen.
Right.
So we have, almost 2 millennia of Christianity going, well, that 5 minutes from now sure hasn't happened yet. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. I think Islam too. I think of Islam as being downstream of Jewish apocalypticism.
That's pretty heavily influenced. Yeah. Katie Lewis says, recruit Dr. Sledge for Diablo critics.
Yeah, I've been getting lots of recruitment recommendations, and it's a troubling situation. I'll just say that. That I'm trying to sort out, but no, it's a great idea. So
what's Diablo?
Diablo
could just
critics.
be
So
like
this is the monthly show that I used to do with Dan McClellan and Josh Bowen and Matt Monger and Jennifer Bird. On Sundays, we would watch videos and answer audience questions. It was a lot of fun. So, but we had to put it on hold for a little while. So, and I'm trying to get it back. But yeah, it's these things.
I mean, if you like watching and debunking bad apologetics, which is most apologetics,
which is not really your thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, aside from most of my answer to when I see apologetic stuff is like, it doesn't say that. Yeah. I'm like, it just doesn't say that. Like, that's not historically accurate. It doesn't say that. I don't know. Yeah, it's somewhat deflationary, I think, often.
Yeah.
Good response.
I mean, and that was all most of their area of expertise involves at least some passing familiarity with like Christian history and text, and I suspect that's probably outside your area of interest.
Yeah, I mean, I would happy to add whatever context I could, but yeah, I don't know. I find most of the apologetic stuff to be so like I don't know what the right word is. It's like so forced. It's like the Rube Goldberg machine of thinking.
Yes.
Yes.
It is. That's perfect.
You just have to do like all of this, like backflips and flip this and move that and shake this and look at it sideways, and then you get like this. And I'm like, or just don't say that.
Just yes.
or yeah.
Occam's razor is a thing.
Yeah.
You can use it.
You can use it, and just like the Rube's Goldbergness of it all. And I'm like, what's more likely that this elaborate story you have to tell about it? And again, I don't want to pick on Christians. I also say this of like Haredi Jews, where they're just like, oh, this is the reason why there's no archaeological evidence for the
Ammonites.
You just read that piece on Chabad lately too, didn't you?
Or just I'm like, oh yeah, I'm on Hillman people. Yeah, I really hope that the people get out of that before someone gets hurt. That's really my honest to God opinion about that.
Mine too.
Like I really honestly, the very little that I've had contact with that stuff, I'm like, I don't want to make fun of anyone. I don't want to say anything mean or hateful. I honestly hope that people get away from that before someone gets hurt, because that is my honest to goodness assessment of what's going to happen with that. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And that includes Amon Hillman. Like I includes him. Like I think that like he's putting himself in a situation where I think someone's going to get hurt, and I really, really deeply don't want that to happen. And it's not about, I don't want to be hateful or mean or poo whatever people believe. Like I think he's incorrect about stuff, but that's not even that to me, that's the least point that I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
What I'm really concerned about is that I think that's developing,
their
rapidly
actual
developing
safety.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is becoming a real that's what I'm worried about. I'm not here to like, the Septuagint or whatever. It's not about that. To me, I think it's actually beyond that, which is even more frightening thing to have to say.
It really is.
Katie Lewis was asking me what piece on Chabad. It's just because we just came out of Passover, they put out an article. It was probably just a repost, like, oh, why isn't there any evidence? And the whole article was like, well, actually, if you kind of sort of squint at these things that people say might be evidence of the accident, and it was a stretch. And I was like, okay, well, just gonna close the tab now.
Yeah. And could it be that some Israelites or other people came out of Egypt and were part of it? Sure. Like the Levitical, the Levite theory.
Sure.
Like, okay, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Like I don't think it's made up. I think something.
Yeah, it's probably got some kind of historical nugget in there. Like maybe
Yeah.
some folks were under a hegemonic, slavery situation or indentured servitude or whatever you want to call it, and then they escaped by whatever means, and it kind of grew into a legend.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
why not?
I think there's a historical memory of something there, but.
Hmm. And as far as origin stories go for a people, it's a pretty good one.
It's a good one. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Right.
Well,
thanks
thank
for having
you
me.
very much for coming and
Absolutely.
hanging out with us for a couple of hours. It's been a lot of fun. I hope everyone in the chat enjoyed it. Do you have anything coming up that you want to promote or that you're doing?
I think the only thing really coming up is I'm gonna try to get this Merkava Hechelot literature class put together sometime this summer. I really want to do that. I feel like that's a literature that a lot of folks don't have a lot of access to. I blame Brill for that because the only translation is by Davila, and it's prohibitive. It's
gajillion dollars.
Yeah, it's just prohibitively expensive, and it shouldn't be the case that this important literature is like this. So, at any rate, I'm gonna be teaching a class on the Merkava literature. So sometime this summer.
Those are ones that people can access that stuff through your web page, right? Your classes.
Yeah, it'll all be on YouTube. I don't do anything.
Okay.
You know, I do a slightly different model where I do basically my classes based on sort of a Patreon push, and I don't do anything via a paywall. Not to say there's not better. There's lots of ways of doing this, but that's the way that I found that I like to do it. And so I'm going to be doing this Hechelot literature class, and I have some more incantation bowls coming. We sold the first 50 before they went live.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really
awesome.
I was kind of upset by that. Not that I could just drop and afford it right now, but I saw it's going out to the patrons first. I was like, we're not going to get them.
Yeah, they all sold before they went live. And so I could commission another 50 that will go live. So yeah, look for if you want an authentic example of a modern version of a Aramaic incantation bowl with a custom written Aramaic incantation.
Love it.
Those will be dropping out sometime soon. So
I know a cohort of almost 50 people that almost all of them would also be interested in that eventually. So
yeah. Folks want them. Also, I think I'll publish the incantation, the Aramaic incantation, if folks want to make their own. So
do it.
Yeah,
I need to practice my scribal skills. I haven't written stuff in a long time.
Well, I can't say the incantation bowls are terribly typical of good scribal skills, but
no.
It's okay.
They're
my handwriting can
You
always
want to
improve.
practice bad Scrabble skills.
You know what?
Yeah.
I'll just invoke the principle of Heder Mitzvah and make the handwriting look pretty.
You can make it look great. Yeah, why not?
There you go. All right. Awesome.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank
So
you
I think
for joining us.
Yeah, it's been great. I really appreciate it. For us, we've got we're back on Dapper Dinosaurs channel on Saturday. I'm actually going to be appearing on Chesh's stream tomorrow to talk about
you're talking about the election, right?
Canadian election. Yes. And so that's tomorrow. We're back on Dapper's channel on Saturday. And on later Saturday afternoon, I'm going to be on Myth Vision podcast with Joshua Bowen, Dr. Joshua Bowen. I think we're doing something about Genesis and the Enuma Elish. I'm not entirely sure, but people should check that stuff out. I included links in the description as well for Justin Sledge's webpage and his YouTube channel. And my dogs are staring daggers at me because they're very hungry. So I got to get out of here before they eat me.
Yep.
Show us your shirt. Fit check.
Oh, fit check. Fucking love the Bible, y'all.
Lean to your right.
But do I have to lean my right? Which way? Which way is that?
Your right.
Yes. And then what? Oh, is it because of the
microphone? I just said lean, not turn. Lean so that we could see your shirt. I'm trying to help you out here.
Okay. Is that that way?
Slide to the right.
Slide to the right. This way.
Yeah, there we go.
Really? Am I not centered?
Don't move the mic. I was trying to keep it from blocking your shirt.
There we go. There
you go. It's available in the store.
It is available in the store. Nice. Yes. Thank you. All right. Thanks everyone for coming out. Thank you again, Justin. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah, have a good night, everyone, and look after yourselves. And as always, ha tikva.